In 2003, Disney did something that every studio executive in Hollywood thought was certifiably insane. They took $140 million, a director who had never worked on anything this big, and a concept based on an animatronic theme park ride that most people over the age of 12 had forgotten about, and they told the world they were going to make a pirate movie. Not a small pirate movie, not a straight-to-video cash grab, a massive ocean-spanning, ship-battling blockbuster, and they were going to do it with real ships on real water in the actual Caribbean. The industry laughed. Critics called it a guaranteed disaster. One trade journalist called it the most expensive gamble Disney had ever taken. That gamble made $654 million at the box office. The franchise that followed made $4.5 billion across 5 films. And at the center of every single one of those movies was a ship that became one of the most recognizable vessels in film history. A ship with black sails, a hull painted to match, and a name that became synonymous with freedom, rebellion, and the golden age of piracy. The Black Pearl. But here is the part that most people never think about. Behind the legend of that fictional pirate ship is one of the most extraordinary feats of practical filmmaking ever attempted. Because the Black Pearl was not just a digital creation or a studio miniature. It was a real vessel. Multiple real vessels, actually. Built, rebuilt, sailed, crashed, sunk, rebuilt again, and sailed thousands of miles across open ocean. And the story of how those ships came to exist is, in many ways, just as fascinating as anything that happened on screen. To understand how the Black Pearl came to life, you need to start with a map. Not a treasure map, though that would be fitting, but a production map. Because the geography of this story stretches across an almost absurd number of locations, from the sound stages of Los Angeles to a tiny fishing village on the Alabama Gulf Coast. From the volcanic shores of the Caribbean island of Dominica to a massive aircraft hangar in the California desert, where the United States military once built B-1 bombers. And each of those locations played a critical role in turning the Black Pearl from a sketch on a production designer's drawing board into a ship that could actually sail. The story begins in Burbank, California, where director Gore Verbinski and producer Jerry Bruckheimer were assembling the team that would bring Pirates of the Caribbean. The Curse of the Black Pearl to the screen. The year was 2002, and the production had a problem that no amount of CGI could solve. Verbinski wanted real ships, not models, not green screen backgrounds. He wanted actual vessels that could move through actual water, with actual actors standing on actual decks surrounded by actual ocean. And more than anything, he wanted the Black Pearl, the most important ship in the story, to feel dangerous, haunted, and undeniably real. The challenge was enormous. The Black Pearl, as described in the screenplay, was a 32-gun pirate vessel, roughly 130 feet long, with distinctive black sails and a charred, weathered hull that looked like it had been dragged up from the bottom of the sea. If you were going to build that ship for real, using authentic wooden construction techniques from the 18th century, you would need approximately 1,700 oak trees. That is roughly the same number of trees that went into building the Hermione, the French frigate that carried the Marquise de Lafayette to America during the Revolutionary War. Nobody had the time, the budget, or frankly the patience for that, so the production team had to get creative. And what they came up with for the first film was, in many ways, a brilliant piece of engineering improvisation. They took a steel barge, 105 feet long and 28 feet wide, and they built the Black Pearl on top of it. Not around it, on top of it. They constructed a massive wooden superstructure, complete with masts, rigging, railings, gun ports, and every detail you would expect from an 18th century pirate vessel, and they bolted the whole thing down to the flat deck of a barge that had about as much in common with a pirate ship as a parking lot has with a cathedral. From the outside, when the cameras were rolling, it looked absolutely convincing. The weathered planking, the dark paint, the tattered sails. Every surface was aged, distressed, and detailed to the point where even maritime historians could nod in grudging approval. But underneath all of that, it was still a steel barge. It had no engine, no rudder, no ability to maneuver under its own power. When the production needed it to move, they hooked it up to a tugboat and towed it into position. And that towing process, as it turned out, was a nightmare. The barge version of the Black Pearl was slow, agonizingly slow. It bobbed in the water like a cork, and because the superstructure was essentially a large rectangular box sitting on a flat platform, it had almost no hydrodynamic properties. Getting it into the right position for a shot could take hours. Lining it up with the other vessels in the scene could take even longer. And because a towed barge does not respond to wind or current the way a real sailing vessel does, every movement looked slightly off, slightly artificial. The camera could hide it, but the actors on deck could feel it. Before we go any further, I need to stop for a second, because what I've been showing you in these videos only scratches the surface. And I realized at some point that the full picture, the actual pirate code, word for word, the real punishment records, the exact treasure division shares, the ports that secretly funded them, it doesn't fit in a video. I put it all into one document, the Black Flag Codex. It's linked below, and the QR code is on your screen. Now, let's keep going. According to actor Lee Arenberg, who played the pirate Pintel, the barge sort of bobbed in the water and would take forever to line up. And in filmmaking, time is money. For certain interior scenes, the production also built sections of the Black Pearl on sound stages in Los Angeles. The Moody captain's cabin, for example, was constructed at the KABC TV studios, an ABC affiliate station in Glendale, California. The principal photography for the first film started on October 9, 2002, and the first 2 weeks of production were spent entirely on those stages, getting the atmospheric interiors locked in before the production moved to open water. They also built a soundstage version of the Pearl for scenes that required controlled fog machines, which are nearly impossible to operate consistently in an outdoor ocean environment. But the real magic of the first film came from a completely different ship. The HMS Interceptor, the fast Royal Navy vessel that Captain Jack Sparrow steals in the first act of the story, was played by a genuine tall ship called the Lady Washington. And the Lady Washington is a remarkable vessel in her own right. Built in 1989 in Aberdeen, Washington, the Lady Washington is a full-scale replica of one of America's earliest sailing ships. The original Lady Washington was constructed in the 1750s in the British colony of Massachusetts and served as a freight carrier during the American Revolutionary War. She later became the first American-flagged vessel to round Cape Horn, the first to make landfall on the west coast of North America, and the first American ship to visit Honolulu, Hong Kong, and Japan. The modern replica was built by the Grays Harbor Historical Seaport Authority as part of the Washington State Centennial Celebration, and she was designated the official ship of the state of Washington. At 112 feet long and 99 tons, the Lady Washington is a two-masted brig traditionally constructed by skilled shipwrights who researched the original vessel extensively. Her mainmast carries a topgallant sail and topsail above a gaff mainsail, and her rigging contains approximately 6 miles of rope. She has a real keel, a real rudder, and genuine sailing capability. She is, in every meaningful sense, the real thing. For the filming of The Curse of the Black Pearl, the Lady Washington made a 40-day voyage from Long Beach, California, through the Panama Canal to the island of St. Vincent in the Caribbean, where the movie was filmed. The journey covered nearly 9,800 nautical miles, and it was not without incident. The crew celebrated Christmas while transiting the Panama Canal, saw dolphins in the open Pacific, and at one point, the Lady snapped off her jib bowsprit in a storm. 3 crew members made the entire voyage: Captain Mark Griffin of St. Helens, Oregon, Dart Davis of Hoquiam, Washington, and a 16-year-old volunteer named Esther Whitmore from Yakima who was transformed from a blonde teenager into a bearded pirate for one of her scenes. Captain Griffin gave Johnny Depp a crash course in how to sail the Lady Washington during the Los Angeles portion of the filming. According to Griffin, Depp was a very quick study. The production also took the Lady Washington out into rough water on at least 2 occasions specifically to film dramatic sailing footage with helicopters overhead and chase boats behind capturing every angle. Now, as impressive as all of that was, the first film's approach to the Black Pearl itself had serious limitations. The barge-mounted set looked great on film, but the logistics of towing it into position for every shot were eating up the production schedule and the budget. Gore Verbinski learned what he liked and what he did not like about the first ship, and by the time the studio greenlit the back-to-back production of Dead Man's Chest and At World's End, he had made a decision. The Black Pearl needed to be a real ship, not a set on a barge, not a soundstage mock-up. A vessel that could move through water under its own power, that could be positioned quickly, that could sail alongside other ships, and that would look and feel convincing from any angle. And that decision led the production to one of the most unlikely locations in American filmmaking history: Bayou La Batre, Alabama. If you have seen the movie Forrest Gump, you already know this town. Bayou La Batre is the home of Forrest's Army buddy Bubba Blue, and later the base of operations for Forrest's shrimp boat business. In real life, Bayou La Batre is a tiny fishing village in Mobile County, Alabama, with a population that barely cracks 2,200 people. It sits on a bayou, which is a slow-moving waterway that connects to Mobile Bay and eventually to the Gulf of Mexico. The bayou itself was originally called Rivière d'Arbonne by the French settlers who established the area in the 18th century, and it acquired its current name from the French-maintained battery of artillery that once sat on its west bank. Bayou of the Battery, Bayou La Batre. But what this tiny fishing village lacks in population, it more than makes up for in shipbuilding heritage. Bayou La Batre has been a center for shipbuilding for generations. The shipyards along the bayou are owned and operated mainly by local families, names like Gazier, Rodriguez, Steiner, and Landry, families that have been building boats in this stretch of water for decades. People from all over the world, from South America to Africa to every coast of the United States, have had boats built in Bayou La Batre. It is, pound for pound, one of the most productive shipbuilding communities in the country. And it was here, at Steiner Shipyard, that the second Black Pearl was born. Steiner Shipyard is a small family-owned operation founded by Russell Bubba Steiner. Despite its modest size, the yard has many of the same capabilities as much larger shipbuilding facilities. They build steel and aluminum vessels of all types, from passenger and cargo ferries to ocean-going pushboats, offshore supply vessels, and commercial fishing trawlers, delivering finished ships all over the world. But of all the vessels that have come out of Steiner Shipyard, the one that everybody remembers, the one that put this little Alabama yard on the global map, is the Black Pearl. In 2005, approximately 8 months before principal photography was scheduled to begin on Dead Man's Chest and At World's End, Walt Disney Studios approached Steiner Shipyard with a request that was unlike anything they had ever received. Disney wanted them to transform an existing vessel into a fully seaworthy pirate ship. The vessel in question was the Sunset, a 109-foot propeller-driven boat that had spent its previous life as an offshore supply vessel, servicing oil derricks in the Gulf of Mexico. According to naval architect and marine engineer Andy Davis, the Sunset was a 1970s-era stout and well-maintained little ship that had been carrying cargo in the Western Caribbean. She was functional, reliable, and about as visually exciting as a delivery truck. But she had one critical quality that made her the perfect candidate for transformation. She was seaworthy, she had engines, she had fuel and water tanks. She had a galley and bunks for crew. She could move through open ocean under her own power. All she needed was a disguise. And what a disguise it would be. Stop for a second. What you just heard about the pirate code is the part that rewrites everything you thought you knew. But it only lands when you see the actual shares, the exact fractions written into the Articles of Agreement, the punishments, the port records, the names of the men who funded them from government offices. It's all in the Black Flag Codex, linked in the description. 5 seconds. Grab it now, because what comes next builds directly on it. Link is below. QR code is on your screen. Production designer Rick Heinrichs, an Academy Award winner for his work on Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow, was the mastermind behind the transformation. Heinrichs and his production team essentially built a pirate ship around the sunset. They took the steel hull and clad it in wood, constructing an elaborate 18th century superstructure that extended from the waterline upward. They made the hull considerably bigger than the version used in The Curse of the Black Pearl, but they had to trim off the stern to give the vessel what Heinrichs described as a little bit more of a swoop. The original barge-mounted Pearl from the first film was established to some degree by the limitations of the barge it was built on. For the sequel, Heinrichs wanted something more flexible, something that could move faster than the 1 or 2 knots the towed barge had managed. The result was a ship that existed in 2 worlds simultaneously. From the waterline up, you had a pirate vessel, aged planking, gun ports, masts, rigging, tattered sails, the angel figurehead at the bow, every detail of the fictional Black Pearl rendered in physical materials that you could touch, stand on, and sail. But below the waterline and hidden within the superstructure, the Sunset was still very much alive. Her engines, her fuel systems, her navigation equipment, her galley, her crew quarters, all of it was still there, still operational, tucked away behind the wooden facade of an 18th century warship. As one crew member described it, Rick Heinrichs and his team built this beautiful ship for the Black Pearl. And it was so clever because it was a real boat. They took a real metal ship and then they clad it as an old wooden ship. The finished product was, by any measure, a masterpiece of practical filmmaking. But the engineering challenges did not stop with the hull. Supervising art director John Dexter was responsible for the ship's visual personality, and he faced a problem that sounds simple but is actually deeply complex. The Black Pearl has to appear black. That is the entire point. It is right there in the name. But a ship that is painted entirely in flat black is, from a cinematographic standpoint, a disaster. It absorbs all light. It loses all detail. It looks like a cardboard cutout against the Caribbean sky. Dexter's solution was to add subtle color variation. The Pearl could not just be black. It needed undertones, highlights, variations in shade and texture that would catch the light differently depending on the angle and the time of day. The weathering had to suggest a ship that had been through fire, through storms, through decades at sea. The wood had to look waterlogged in some places and sun-bleached in others. The metalwork had to show corrosion. The rigging had to look frayed. Every single surface needed to tell a story, and that story needed to read as ancient, cursed pirate vessel, not freshly built movie prop. Meanwhile, art director Bruce Crone, who had previously worked on Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World, was in charge of designing the entire fleet of ships for the 2 sequels, the Black Pearl, the Flying Dutchman, the HMS Endeavour, the Chinese junks, and many others. Crone assembled what Heinrichs described as an amazing team of set designers who worked away in Burbank, functioning almost as a mini art department unto themselves. They produced thousands of drawings, blueprints, and specifications that had to reconcile the demands of historical accuracy, cinematic drama, and practical engineering. One of the most fascinating details of the rebuilt Black Pearl was the capstan, the large vertical revolving machine used for winding in rope or cable on a sailing ship. The weathered capstan used in the sequel films was the very same one from the first film's barge-mounted set. It was one of the few physical elements that survived the transition from the original production to the new vessel, a tangible thread connecting the two incarnations of the same fictional ship. When the construction was finally complete, the Black Pearl set sail from Steiner Shipyard in Bayeux-la-Batre on a voyage that would take it almost 2,000 nautical miles to the Caribbean island of Dominica. Dominica, not to be confused with the Dominican Republic, is a volcanic island in the Lesser Antilles, located southeast of Puerto Rico. It was chosen as a primary filming location for its dramatic coastline, its lush tropical interior, and its relative lack of modern development that would have required extensive digital removal. At Capucine Point on Dominica, the very first scenes shot on the redesigned and rebuilt Black Pearl were filmed. As the Pearl plowed through the Caribbean waves, the production team knew they had something special. The ship moved through the water with a confidence and a grace that the old barge had never possessed. She could be positioned quickly. She could run alongside other vessels. She could be filmed from any angle without revealing the modern infrastructure hidden within her hull. The upper masts and additional sails would be added later by the visual effects team using computer-generated imagery. But the core vessel, the hull, the deck, the lower rigging, was all real. Captain Glenn Kiwi Hall was credited as the technician and captain of the Sunset throughout the filming. It was Hall who navigated the vessel through open water, who managed the engines and the crew, who made sure that this hybrid of 18th century aesthetics and 20th century engineering stayed upright and on course in the unpredictable Caribbean Sea. But the Black Pearl that sailed to Dominica was not the only version of the ship that existed during the production of the sequels. For the climactic Maelstrom battle in At World's End, where the Black Pearl and the Flying Dutchman engage in a devastating broadside exchange while circling a massive whirlpool, a completely different approach was required. You cannot create a mile-wide whirlpool in the actual ocean. You cannot make a real ship tilt and heave to the degree required by the screenplay. And you certainly cannot do it safely with dozens of actors, stunt performers, and crew members standing on the deck. So the production moved to one of the most unusual filming locations in cinema history, Site 9, an enormous aircraft hangar in Palmdale, California, 58 miles north of the Walt Disney Studios. This hangar, 600 feet long, 300 feet wide, and 70 feet tall, was originally built for the construction of B-1 bombers for the United States military. Steven Spielberg had previously used the same facility to build the terminal set for his film The Terminal. Now, Rick Heinrichs and his team would use it to build ships. Inside this cavernous space, Heinrichs constructed full-size replicas of the decks and bulwarks of both the Black Pearl and the Flying Dutchman, along with a third vessel. These were not complete ships. They were the upper portions, the parts that actors would stand on and fight across, built from the deck up on massive mechanical rigs equipped with gimbals. These gimbals, designed by special effects engineers, could tilt and heave the enormous structures by as much as 15 feet, simulating the violent motion of ships caught in a massive storm at sea. The effect was that the actors were genuinely being thrown around on pitching, rolling decks, with water cannons blasting them from every direction, wind machines creating gale force conditions, and the gimbal mechanisms lurching the entire set through movements that would be physically impossible to achieve on an actual ocean. The maelstrom itself, the swirling wall of water surrounding the combatants, was entirely computer-generated. But everything the actors interacted with, the decks, the rigging, the cannons, the railings, the flying debris, was real and physical. The combination of real sets on mechanical rigs with digital environmental effects remains one of the most impressive technical achievements in the Pirates franchise. And then, once the sequels were complete, the Sunset began yet another transformation. For the fourth film in the series, Pirates of the Caribbean, On Stranger Tides, the Black Pearl does not appear as a full-size vessel. In the story, the ship has been magically shrunk and placed inside a glass bottle by the pirate Blackbeard. a miniature ship-in-a-bottle version, was meticulously built under the supervision of property master Kirk Corwin and was later animated by visual effects supervisor Charles Gibson's team for maximum effect. But the Sunset herself was not retired. Instead, she underwent another complete reconstruction, this time to portray Blackbeard's ship, the Queen Anne's Revenge. Production designer John Meyer, who took over from Heinrichs for the fourth film, began by drawing up really beautiful Baroque details for the ship, almost like Versailles, which would have made it look rich and elegant. They showed the drawings to Jerry Bruckheimer and director Rob Marshall, and Bruckheimer loved them but pushed for something scarier. Since the most famous pirate flag is the skull and crossbones, Bruckheimer suggested working skulls and skeletons into the actual design of the ship. The result was a vessel that looked like it had been decorated by death itself. The transformation from Black Pearl to Queen Anne's Revenge required significant structural changes. The production team had to put several tons of lead weight in the front of the ship to prevent it from popping a wheelie, because the new superstructure changed the vessel's center of gravity. By the time the work was finished, the ship was 100 tons heavier than it had been as the Black Pearl. 100 tons. That is the weight of roughly 50 mid-size cars, all added to a vessel that was originally designed to haul supplies to oil rigs. There was also another real ship that played a significant role in the Pirates franchise, one with a tragic postscript. The HMS Bounty replica, which appeared in Dead Man's Chest as the merchant ship Edinburgh Trader, was originally built for the 1962 MGM film Mutiny on the Bounty. This replica had a long and celebrated life after its original film appearance. It was open to the public for tours, it participated in tall ship festivals, and people could even pay to sail aboard it. The Bounty also recreated the voyage of the original ship, crewed by a combination of volunteers and paid sailors. On October 29, 2012, the Bounty sank off the coast of North Carolina during Hurricane Sandy. The crew was forced to abandon the vessel, and tragically, crew members were lost. It was a sobering reminder that real ships on real oceans carry real risks, a reality that the Pirates of the Caribbean production teams had navigated across 4 films and thousands of miles of open water. The engineering legacy of the Black Pearl extends far beyond the films themselves. The decision to build a real ship, to take an unglamorous Gulf of Mexico supply vessel and transform it into one of the most iconic fictional ships in cinema history, set a standard for practical filmmaking that continues to influence the industry. In an era when digital effects can create entire oceans and fleets from scratch, the Pirates franchise proved that there is something irreplaceable about a real ship on real water. The way the light hits a wet deck, the way the rigging creaks in the wind, the way an actor braces against a genuine roll of the ocean. These are details that even the best CGI cannot fully replicate, and they are a large part of why the Black Pearl feels so convincingly real, even in a story about cursed pirates and sea goddesses. The Sunset herself, after completing her service to the franchise, returned to private ownership. Reports indicate that she eventually made her way to Hawaii, though she no longer sails in her Black Pearl configuration. Somewhere in the Pacific, the steel bones of an oil rig supply vessel carry the memory of the most famous pirate ship that never existed. Her hull, which once hauled cargo through the Western Caribbean, spent years disguised as an 18th century warship, sailed thousands of miles under the flag of fiction, and was rebuilt at least twice by some of the most talented production designers in Hollywood. The Lady Washington, the real tall ship that played the HMS Interceptor, continues to sail the Pacific coast. She is operated by the Grays Harbor Historical Seaport Authority and serves as both an educational vessel and a working film set. She has appeared in Star Trek Generations, the television series Once Upon a Time, and several other productions. Today, members of the public can book passage on her and experience, at least in some small measure, what it was like to sail the kind of vessel that once carried pirates, merchants, and revolutionaries across the world's oceans. And Steiner Shipyard in Bayou La Batterie, the little family-owned operation that built the Black Pearl, continues to build vessels. The business was passed from Russell Steiner to his daughter, Tara Steiner Marshall, in 2019, continuing a tradition of quality shipbuilding that now spans 3 generations. They have built push boats, escort tugs, passenger ferries, and dozens of other working vessels. But of all the ships that have slid down their ways into the warm water of the bayou, none has ever matched the fame of the pitch-black pirate vessel they launched into the Gulf of Mexico one spring day in 2005. When you watch the Pirates of the Caribbean films today, when you see the Black Pearl cutting through Caribbean waves with her tattered black sails catching the wind, remember what you're actually looking at. You're looking at a 1970s-era Gulf of Mexico supply boat named the Sunset, wrapped in wood and paint and imagination by a team of artists, engineers, and craftsmen who refused to believe that a computer could do it better. You are looking at the work of a family-owned shipyard in a town of 2,200 people. You are looking at a vessel that sailed 2,000 miles under a fictional flag, crewed by a captain named Kiwi and a production team that won Academy Awards. And you are looking at proof that sometimes the most incredible engineering is not about building something from nothing. It is about taking something ordinary and turning it into something that the whole world believes is magic. That is the real story of the Black Pearl. Not a ship that was conjured from digital code on a render farm in Los Angeles. A ship that was hammered into existence in the boatyards of Alabama, sailed across the Caribbean by real sailors, and filmed by a director who was stubborn enough to believe that the audience would know the difference. They did.